You find so many people in the West saying, well, I didn't colonize, I didn't own slaves, I didn't kill the Native Americans, and so on and so on and so on. Blame my ancestors. Okay. Well, you should consider the fact that your descendants are going to be saying the same thing about you unless you do something, for example, about the genocide in Gaza. Because if you're not doing something to stop one of the most blatant, the most publicized, the most observed, the most reported, and the most detailed genocide that any of us has ever known about, if you're not doing something about that right now, then you can best believe that your children and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren are going to blame you for that, and they're going to try to evade responsibility for their own crimes and for the responsibility for the global situation that is created as a result of your complacency today. The only thing that you're interested in is trying to evade responsibility for the past crimes that were committed by your ancestors, and not concerned about preventing the current crimes being committed by this current generation, by you yourself and your own society and your own country and your own government. If you're not doing something to prevent that now, then you'd best believe that your future generations are going to blame you the same way that you blame your grandparents and great-grandparents. And you see this, and people say this. How could they have, like in America, how could people possibly have tolerated and accepted slavery? And they think to themselves, if I had lived back in those days, I would have been an abolitionist and I would have done everything possible to free the African slaves in the United States. Well, you have more slaves in the world today than there ever have been. And you're profiting from it, and you're benefiting from it. Your smartphone was made by means of slavery. All of your technology, in fact, was made by means of slavery. And you're not doing anything about it, the same way that your ancestors didn't do anything about it, because they profited from it and they benefited from it. You're not any different than they were. You see those horrific pictures of families on picnics with a lynched body hanging above their heads, above their families, and above their children, and they're just sitting there eating sandwiches. And you think that that's just horrific and unimaginable. Meanwhile, you're sitting and eating a pizza, watching CNN, and people being murdered in Gaza. What's the difference? You can't talk about the previous generations as if you're any different than they are. You're exactly the same. You never changed. You never changed as a so-called civilization. You never changed as a so-called culture. You're exactly the same today as you were then. And if you don't change, then believe me, like I said, the future generations are going to disown you the same way that you disown your ancestors.